Nobody can stop me now.
G'day guys, welcome back to the Hobby Hatch. In this episode, we're continuing on my custom sci-fi universe called Lament, and before we get into the build, a little bit of lore. In every corner of the dirge, a wasted, overgrown pit that serves as the setting of Lament. Clandestine organizations hunt for technology and artifacts they believe are the key to controlling the region, or are too dangerous to remain outside of their sphere of influence. The Interregnum, a secretive organization of unknown age, scours the lands with well-equipped operatives, infiltrating and assaulting the clans, cults, and cadres of the dirge, and confiscating their prized artifacts. One such artifact is the fabled Eye of Hakod, said to be the remains of the god of the void who shares the same name. The Eye of Hakod is a sacred relic, protected and worshipped by the cult known as the Cult of the Twisted Sun. The artifact is obscure to say the least, but rumors say it has the abilities to twist any who look into it into stretched monstrosities dubbed Twisted Suns by those unlucky enough to have seen them. Alright, onto the build. I began by kitbashing and sculpting these cultists, and for this I used some Napoleonic infantrymen as a base to work off of from Perry Miniatures. These were the right scale for the build and were relatively cheap for a 44 pack, so they were the perfect base to build off when sculpting. I can't seem to do any kitbash without involving admech bits, but their hooded heads were kind of perfect for this application, and so I used them to start shaping the cultists. I used a 50-50 mixture of green stuff and milliput to build up the robes using my metal and silicon sculpting tools. The cultists of the Twisted Sun are a weird bunch, believing that it is the ultimate sacrifice and blessing to gaze upon the Eye of Hakod, though it is their solemn duty to maintain the artifact and its inner sanctum. To do this without being affected by its power, they wear ceremonial masks, each mask permanently fixed upon their faces, blinding them but safeguarding them from becoming a Twisted Sun. Once the putty had cured, I moved on to painting. I wanted these cultists to have rich red robes, which would complement but set them apart from the terrain. To get this effect, I started with a deep red, corn red base coat, followed by vermilion. I then went in and painted the masks black, and proceeded to lose all the remaining footage of painting these guys, but effectively, I painted a light reflection effect on the masks, and decided to tint all of the shadows with purple. I then began kitbashing our Interregnum operative. The base of the model was a Necromunda hive scum body, which I cut down to look a little more utilitarian. The head was taken from a Warhammer Adeptus Arbites kill team kit, and had a nice shocked look on his face. To begin his transformation into a twisted monstrosity, I used a Gene Stealer arm from the Necromunda Hive Secundus kit and placed it as his right arm. To keep the twisted, mutated theme going, I drilled and suspended one of his legs using a piece of brass rod. In a later step, we'll be covering this in a plastic adhesive to make it look like his skin is being stretched and pulled apart. I added some armor padding and other details with more of the green stuffed milliput mix, before adding some extra details with greeblies. Now onto the stretchy gore effect. The technique is fairly simple. Uhu glue is applied with a toothpick over the area you'd like the gore effect to cover. The longer you wait before applying the glue, the thicker the strands will be, and so you can achieve a really nice varied effect if you apply it as it dries. You might have seen this effect put to good use on finished painted models to give them the appearance of splash blood and gore, but it can be equally used before the painting process to give the effect of torn skin and flesh. Before painting, I repeated this effect on his mutated arm. Onto the painting. I started by base coating the model in purple as I'm going to maintain it as my shadow colour. For the armour panels, I decided to go with turquoise, which I sprayed through the airbrush, and for the brightest parts of the armour, to push the colour a little further, I used a bright verdigris colour by Vallejo. I base coated the pants and undersuit in red, and then highlighted it with a bright orange, ensuring I reintroduced the purple to the shadows for model continuity. For the skin tone, I went with a pale sickly tone, and to achieve this I started with Flayed One Flesh by Citadel, which is a bright, quite desaturated off-white colour. I then did a heavy wash over the entire surface using Dreadful Visage contrast paint. This paint is purple, but it's quite light and desaturated, so worked really well for the continuity of the purple shadows. I painted sections that would likely be inflamed from all the mutations with Volupus Pink. I then reinforced the skin tone with highlights of ivory, ensuring that I maintained the highlight pattern to be consistent with the rest of the model. With the skin tone done, I went in and painted all the remaining details sprinkled around the model, starting with the shotgun barrel. For this, I went in with a silver non-metallic metal finish with brown bounce highlights. After that was completed, I began working on the terrain. To start, I wanted the poor Interregnum operative to be standing on a tablet etched with the Cult's markings. To sculpt this, I used Das clay. It's a non-toxic paper-based clay that air dries, so it's quite easy to sand and carve once it's dry and cured, which was perfect for this application. Once the clay had dried, I traced out the design on the surface and began carving it out with my metal sculpting tools. I went for a crude imitation of the Cult's monument and carved it out. I then decided to add some runes to complete the piece and fill in some of the blank spaces. I then went ahead and built up the bulk of the terrain with various pieces of XPS foam, which I glued down to a paint canvas. I added some texture to the surface with a mixture of plaster, paint and Mod Podge, which I shaped with an old crusty brush. With all the crusted texture dry, I cut a hole for the stone slab we sculpted earlier. I then cut a piece of XPS foam into this geometric prism, which will act as the cultist's sacred monument, the Eye of Hakod. I cut a hole in the terrain so I could set the monument without gluing it down, and paint it later. I wanted an altar to surround the monument that resembles an iris, so when you look down the length of the diorama, it would look like the monument is the pupil of an eye. For this effect, I traced out a ring around the monument, and then using more dust clay, I attempted to sculpt an iris texture. I then spray primed everything black, including some ritual bowl details, and began painting. The entire thing got the same purple treatment as the operative, before being highlighted with a light grey. I made sure to keep the airbrush at the same angle to give the effect of directional highlights over the entire diorama's surface when applying the grey. I decided it'd be cool for this iris to have a marbled effect. So to achieve this, I stretched out a dry wet wipe and sprayed flat white paint through over black underneath. I repeated this over the entire thing. I think the effect would have turned out better had I left the putty smooth, as your eye gets pulled away by all the texture, but let me know what you think. I then hit all the raised edges with a dry brush of light grey. After that, I glued the ritual bowls down and filled them with Vallejo still water effects that I mixed with blood for the blood god technical paint. Blood holds a special arcane significance to the cults of the Dirge, and as such, you won't find a cult performing rituals without a large amount of blood being around. I went in and added flocking over the entire diorama, and then added the same twisted gore effect to the pedestals of the ritual bowls. These were painted in the exact same way as the gore effect on the operator. After that, I slathered dirty down moss to the most of the diorama to add some variation and give it more of a green pop. I then added some sienna pigment powders over the open spaces of the terrain to tie them all together. The last thing to paint was the monument, and for this I used Muso Black, which is an extremely black acrylic paint, which I sprayed through the airbrush, and though it can be hard to see just how black this paint is on camera, they aren't kidding. It's really, really black. You can see it makes my black nitrile gloves look grey. If my camera is really trying its best to brighten the scene so you can see it enough. With all that done, all that was left was to glue the characters and monument down, and it was time for the Glamour Shots.
Stay calm.
Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you liked the video, consider leaving a like and subscribing for more content. If you have any questions, feedback, or video suggestions, or you just want to say anything at all, don't hesitate to comment down below. I read each and every one and try to get back to each and every one as well. Sorry for the delay in uploading this one. I was very busy over the new year getting married, so I was taking a break from my video projects. Rest assured, I don't intend on abandoning this channel, so projects should keep coming your way. If you want to see any updates on how my projects are going, I have an Instagram and I post update pictures there. Anyway, if you have the itch for more Hobby Hatch content, consider checking out these videos. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.